Welcome to Warblog. This is a double video, sort of, to introduce Task Force Takuba. So it's all quite interesting, so let's get straight into it. This isn't really a scenario because it doesn't exist yet. They're putting Task Force Takuba together. It will have initial operational capability by the summer of 2020, in theory, and be fully operational by 2021. And you've got a quiz for this. What does Takuba mean in Tuareg? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? When there's that sabre. How many deaths were reported in the area in 2019? You know that. When is it hoped that Task Force Takuba will become fully operational? That's a difficult one. I'm going to guess 2021. What is the name of the current French counterinsurgency operation in the area? Operation Barkhane. And how many peacekeeping troops does it take to change a light bulb? I mean, how many peacekeeping troops does the United Nations currently have in Mali? I think 13,000. And I got them all right. Isn't that amazing? I'm supposed to be really clever. But anyway, so the whole point of this is that this task force is going in there to deal with all of this. Now there's only one unit there, and presumably they're sort of in there anyway. So we've got the Task Force Takuba, which is made up of these European countries, and we've got the Burkina Faso, Chadian, Mali, Mauritania and Niger units with some French air power. I'm just throwing all that together because this is really not what this scenario is about, although it's just reflecting that this Operation Barkhane is across a broader area, so it encompasses more of Nigeria, more of Mali. This is basically to deal with the Liptako region. So I'm pretty sure it says that in here. And in particular the ISIL. So although this is the Boko Haram Insurgency, this in particular area is where ISIL lives. And so that's what we're dealing with here. Now the thing is, you've got to go around and you've got to take all these places. Now the thing that in particular about this, and I don't know whether it will actually work, fingers crossed it will. I haven't really tested it yet. This is my test. But there are random counters. So basically there are, what we've had for a long while, we've had hidden counters. So this is not hidden, obviously, because you can see it, but there might be a unit there. Now the thing is, if you play this game, you might get used to the fact that there's a unit there, and then you're going to go straight for it. However, the units have been randomly allocated, so there's an array. It's got like 20 hexes in it. And I've got two arrays. I can maybe do more or less, but you know, it seems random enough in theory. And so what it will do, it will place, for the beginning of the turn, the beginning of the game, it will place each of these units, apart from the ones that are already on the map. This one is already on the map. This is the one we've seen. This one, regardless of whether they find anything, will come on turn 3 there, and this one will come on turn 5. So these are the 3 that you're going to get, but the rest of these, all of these are hidden. And the significance of that, as you probably might have figured out, but I feel like I have to explain it, is they're randomly placed. So we don't know where they're going to be. So we could play it this time and they'll be in such a place, and we could play it next time and they'll be in different places. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that what we're trying to do is to basically clean out all of these villages. So we're not trying to destroy them, we're trying to destroy these camps So we're going to go around and do these things. So it's not necessarily to take out these units, although it is actually. It is to take these units out, but we're also, trying to take control of the Liptako region. So the thing is, if you were to just go around and take that, then another unit could appear on the map and come back and take it, because you don't really have that many units. You don't have enough units to sit there holding everything. So it's really a case of going around, taking these units, and using the air power and military strategy to take out all these units. And in theory, you've got to destroy all of these units. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So there's 12 units hidden across this map that you've got to find and destroy. And that's the thing, that's what they're trying to do. And I think that game mechanic that I just added should in theory give another angle to that, in the sense that you can play it again and again. And whilst it isn't a sort of, I wouldn't say it's an astoundingly exciting game concept, it does offer the scope for playing the game again and again, because you don't know where the counters are going to be. And so in theory, it's sort of, you can play it again and again. So it is a form of artificial intelligence, or I really want to suggest it is, but it is in the sense that they're always in different locations. But the other thing to bear in mind is they're not in completely random locations. I have actually picked them, but ironically I have picked them at completely random locations, so they are across the board. I did focus on making sure that there were quite a few in this area, or quite a few options, but it could be that all the random ones are here, and here. So, for example, it's not completely random in the sense that if this was a big sea area, they wouldn't appear in the sea. For example, there's nothing that appears in Kodugu, nothing, and there's nothing that appears in Yahoo. It's not going to happen. They're too far south. So, there is some intelligence in that. So we're going to just sort of jump in and play it. So in theory, they're in there. Now I'm not going to think too much strategy, because what I want to do is to find some of these units. So the thing is, you've got to have a strategy. And let's face it, there isn't really much of a strategy. Not really, so you've just got to move the units about, really. Okay. And remember where you've been. I hope I've done it right. Now, because I'm just sort of almost just rushing this in order to demonstrate this proof of concept, so to speak, I am not I'm not doing. I don't know what it is I'm not doing, but I think it is. I'm not putting I'm not marking it. But the thing is, in theory, what you should do is print the map off and mark where you've been, I guess. That's what I was trying to say. What I'm saying, yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Because in theory, what you need to do is you need to sort of come up with a strategy, obviously, that goes without saying, we've figured that, but you have to sort of think, well, am I going to go in mass like this? So if I pop something up I'm going to be able to beat it, or I'm going to split my forces to cover a wider area, and run the risk of him. See, there might be nothing over here, but there might be three. There might be one there, one there, or there might be two in there. And if I walk into there, I could be outnumbered. I could be up against, all of a sudden, I could be up against 3 units, 3 insurgents. So what I'm saying is, you've got to sort of possibly think, well, shouldn't we sort of maybe try to group together, and how thin can you spread your line, etc., etc. Okay, so they've been hit. See, they could go after this unit, or this unit. Right, so it looks like we've taken this place. I didn't think of that, actually. So we will rest and recover, is what we're going to do. So they are now down to 4. Right. I haven't met any bad guys yet. Maybe it's not working. I'm going to pause it for 1 minute. Okay, figured out what's gone wrong. Something had gone wrong. I read it quite quickly and I did my SQL wrong. Not a big problem, because we now start again. We know what we're doing. So we're pretty much going to do the same thing. I haven't tested it yet, so hopefully this will work now. So again, what we're sort of trying to do, there is something that is wrong that will Oh no, not a big one. It's so not a big one, I've deleted it now. There's a unit there. I'm pretty sure he's there. It's just a test unit, so I won't go in there. Oh mate, let me just look. Okay, I have to start game, but no problems. I'm pretty sure that it's going to work. I'm saying I'm pretty sure because it's one of those things that you program, you always think that you've sort of done it, and then you haven't. Right, so we know what we're doing, so it won't take us long. Now, we don't know where they're going to be, but I have checked, and in theory, they are there. But I don't know where. I'm excited, but only to see whether it actually works. So we're going to do a line. There's got to be something in here. What I should really do is just look at the code. Right, let me look at the code. Well, I have looked at the code, and I'm pretty sure there's one there. So we've come all the way up here, we haven't found anything, but if I go into there, and it worked! There he is. I feel like I cheated there, because I looked, but we now know that it works, so I'm going to start again. Now, because I'm rushing it, so to speak, I'm not really sort of giving it the best effect game-wise as to what you might do. I'm not going to bother with the air power. So I'm going to just leave them sat there. So, we did destroy that campsite. So with these guys, we're just sort of wandering around aimlessly. Oh look, we've run into something. So we found some ISIL units there. Now, I'm quite excited, a little bit, but you sort of think, well, hang on, now all of a sudden your strategy's got to change. Now, because we've got 3 units on their own, and we're in close proximity. So in theory, we could just jump in here now and attack. The only problem is they can attack back. And we can use these guys so we routed him. So we dispatched some ISIL, and they've got ISIS, haven't they? Change that, but that's not urgent. Okay, so we're back onto this. Now we've got a fairly strong line there, but something, well, maybe we could spread it out. Now the other thing I did think about doing was having air support or air spotters or some kind of, because we've got Recce units, and the Recce unit would be able to spot anything within 2 hexes, so the Recce unit would spot everything like that, so you could spread them out more, but the Recce unit would be quite small, so that's something to do and maybe think about. I haven't really got that far, but I do think there should be other ways to spot them, including drones. It's just a case of figuring it out and doing it in a way that works, that doesn't involve too much programming. Because it's easy to do it when you're moving. You move into the hex, you can do a check, but to do it that way, it's quite difficult to sort of say, well, okay, I've got a Recce unit, if I move in there, so then check every one of these hexes every time I move that, because there's no way of knowing it's a Recce unit, so it's sort of something I might have to double think. I might have to sort of do Recce units can only do one Recce, but their scope is maybe larger, so they could move up to here and then they could Recce everything within 2 hexes, but that might be quite powerful. But they could go there and then they could Recce everything, which would mean that they could move 2 hexes and then they could get all of this. So instead of visiting all of these hexes, you're only visiting 2 of them, and the other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 you get for free. But I've also put a modifier on that, so it's not certain, which makes it a bit odd, because you would never be certain, but you could be, close. But anyway, I'm yet to get that. Oh. He's going to move away. Oh, we got one. Oh, we got 2. So in that instance, 2 of them are in the same thing, and they're entrenched. So we've now got a front line of things that we need to fight, which is quite interesting, because if that other unit was still there, then we could have had some of these units could have been lost. Now they're up against all of the task force, the coalition for the Sahel task force Takuba troops. So that's not ideal, but we could have done that with some of these weaker motorized units. These special forces are quite vulnerable on their own. They get their attack bonus, which is great, because it's 5 times, so 3 times, like 15. They're going to mince meat these irregulars. But the if they get caught out on their own, they're quite vulnerable because they're just flesh and blood, and these people have got bullets and guns and things. So it's interesting, I think. This is what the only reason I'm really doing this video is to sort of look at the way that works, and in particular the way that it won't be the same next time. So you won't know that that unit was wherever it was over here, and you won't know that that unit was over here. And and this guy, he's actually just appeared as a reinforcement, and he just appeared there. So he's the one that comes on turn 3. So he wasn't a sort of surprise unit, but he will always turn up on turn 3 there, so we know that. Which is sort of, to be quite honest, I don't want too many random factors, but I think in the search and destroy missions, especially in like the Vietnam ones, I think it's actually better to have it random, because I don't want to be ahistoric. Not that everything is so tightly historic that it has to be as it is, but for setups I prefer the sort of the chess approach, where you know what the opening moves are going to be each time. But on these sorts of games it's very different, and I think you've got to be capable of carrying out the sweeping actions. And I don't think it's good. I think once you've got the hang of it and you know the ropes, it will become maybe boring. You know, you just could do the same thing, just sweep across in a big line like that. But you know, I mean, how effective is that going to be? If I can get the recce units and the drones in, you know, and then maybe not have so many units, what effect will that have? You know, would it mean that you might sweep out longer and wider, or you know, have your units say stacked up so that they're not vulnerable? Because if we'd run into those 2 units there, this unit would have been quite vulnerable. But anyway, so we've come into this. I mean, let's face it. I was going to say, let's face it, they shouldn't actually have been there, should they? Because he obviously woke them up. He moved from there into there, woke them up. They would have been both in there. One of them went there, one of them weren't there, but they shouldn't be entrenched. Or should they? I mean, it doesn't mean they were there and they ran away. It means when you went into that hex, suddenly you realised that you were surrounded by 2 other units. I mean, it could be that they were there, but we could then say, well, when he moved into there, why didn't he see them? So, because I can't be bothered. It's a bit late. It's a bit late, and I don't really want to start faffing around like that. You know, adding this sort of additional code to take away, you know, something. But to be quite honest, units that are hidden shouldn't necessarily be entrenched, although they could be, because otherwise they're always going to be entrenched, because it's going to take you ages to find them or dug in. Anyway, I won't worry too much about that. Let's fight them. So in this instance, we're going to basically wipe them off the board. Look, this is going to be. This should be a 7-1. Yeah. We're only DR, and this should be the same. However, the next thing that you might want to consider in this situation is surrounding them. We had the opportunity to do that there and then didn't. I think we can do it now. We have to get that X. we could probably trash them so much that they're not going to be viable. DR. We should eliminate this guy. Yep, routed. What happened there? Okay, so we've managed to destroy all the units we've bumped into, but we've lost our formation now. So we've taken out 3 units of 9 or 12 without any cost really. Got one. I'll get there. Can't special forces go through zones of control? Yes. Oh, look at that. I'll get there. I'm forgetting all about that guy as well. He might go back there, you know. I'm feeling lucky on this one. Where did he go? Well, what was that? An exchange. Well, that was unfortunate because then what happens is no one else can move, so then they can attack. So they beat some special force units, but now they're stacked up. It's going to be a one-to-one exchange, but they don't get the exchange. Or did they? But they did. Okay. Grand assault. BE. And they're eliminated. So now we've lost our formation, so we really need to have that bit of paper with our routes on it so that we know where we've been. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. I feel a bit disjointed because I had to break off and resolve the problems and didn't have the full flow on that, but I'm quite interested, I'm quite excited about that. I'm quite interested in how this is working out. I think it would be nice if I can get the Recce and the drones in, but I probably won't anytime soon. It was the real wild whim that I got this together, and it was only like 10 lines of code, so that's like fantastically simple. But I think the thing that's appealed to me most is this map's actually quite interesting. Maps are of one sort or another, and sometimes they're sort of, you can't make a map up. You can't, you can't make a map look interesting. For example, in these games, that's the map. You can't make it look interesting if it's not interesting. I thought, well, I could put some contours in here, but really, are there actually any sort of significant contours? There's got to be more to it, but it's quite difficult to actually figure anything out from Google Maps, which is what I use. I use some other mapping tools, but it's a matter of time, and I don't have the time to sort of extensively research the terrain on everything. But I think it's all about roll the dice, so to speak, or the dice are rolled by fate. This was in this area, in wherever this is. I wonder where this is, in Nigeria. And it is just bush. Whereas here, fate has given us a much more interesting, topography. I mean, the scale is very different as well. I mean, this is probably 100 miles across, whereas this is probably about 10 miles across. And so, that's sort of is a factor as well. The border is sort of just off this map over here. There's some borders anyway. Anyway, I'm super tired. I really like that. But hopefully I'll be able to remember to use more randomly generated units now that I have the option to do that. And it means if we play the game again, they'll be in very different places, although if you were to they're like the reels on a fruit machine. You can actually learn them, and it will help you figure things out. Basically, there are only, I would say, 30 locations where these things can randomly appear, but you're not going to spend so much time on this one game trying to figure out where the 30 locations are. To all intents and purposes, it's significantly different. And I think if you were to be playing in earnest, again, you would play it kind of differently, because you would then actually start using these units. This is why I put these units in as reinforcements, and start off with one unit, so you can actually start doing things. So you could actually run away over to the side of the board and, constantly, and I've played some other games, be outmaneuvering the coalition force, so that when they come down here you can take Haram. This is one thing that can be taken, so you can move into there and take it. So this strategy doesn't make any sense because it doesn't protect anything down here. So that's that really. I'll leave it at that. So it's a double video, so the new development and obviously this new game, but it's not so much a game that this won't be active. Task Force Takuba until summer 2020, and full operation until 2021. The only other thing I will say about this is interesting times that they've just sort of put this task force together because the situation is quite difficult in this area, the Liptako region, and the Nigerians were about to put a major operation in against Boko Haram, and they got preempted with 2 major assaults, which is what these ones are all about. In this one, they lost between 50 and 75 dead, and in this one, in Chad, again another exciting map, they lost about 92. They attacked the Chadian forces, so 75 for the Nigerians, 92 for the Chadians. Those are serious blows. And they don't get much reporting on them, but that's by the by. The thing is, they obviously decided to put this task force in because of the instability. But of course, there is the elephant in the room, which is coronavirus. And I don't really want to talk too much about it because it's not really something that I want to be focusing on, because I'm sure everyone's focusing on it already. But it is interesting how such a major event that seems to be affecting everyone will impact modern war. So I'm not going to start integrating disease into the gameplay because it's just not appropriate really. But I've been thinking about that. Well, the one thing that it will probably do in Africa will stoke the flames of conflict, so to speak. And in places like this, I was reading somewhere in Mali, it's basically said that 95% of the hospitals have been destroyed by the war. That the insurgency, I found that a bit hard to believe because I'm pretty sure that it doesn't go all the way into the major capital cities. It's just on the sort of, the Sahel region. But anyway, that's what it said. Maybe 95% have been somehow damaged by the war. But the thing is, in the Western world, there's a lot of farewell, we're out of toilet paper in the supermarkets. Well, these people are going to be out of supermarkets, and they don't have supermarkets. There's going to be a lot of problems arising out of the disease if it spreads. Now, I have thought about that as well, and not intensely, and obviously it's going to be a difficult situation. But the thing is, we've just come out of a winter into a summer. You know, it's April now, so we're in spring, approaching summer, so it started at the worst time of the year, but that was ideal because now we're going into a sort of recovery. But south of the equator, so to speak, they're going to be approaching their winter. I'm not sure how near Mali is to that. Probably more towards the equator, being sort of pretty warm all the way through the year, I guess. But you know, certainly further south, South Africa, they're going into their winter now. So they've just picked it up, and they're going to go into their winter, which is flu season. So we, as a Western nations, obviously China, highly industrialized, Europe, Iran even, fairly well developed, obviously America, are all sort of battling with this virus in a way that the African states just can't do. I mean, they can't, you know, we had a run on toilet paper and that was about it. You know, things I noticed that were unavailable, eggs, and, well, there were a few other things, especially in the early stages. But it's just a joke in comparison to sort of what these people, especially in Yemen and Somalia and, you know, all these war-torn regions, I mean, they're not going to be able to, they're not going to have the same discipline. As soon as they say it's lockdown, crime is going to go through the roof, or at least I imagine it will. And so what I'm trying to get to here is this sort of task force Takuba. It could be, some of the impetus behind it could be to be in place to basically pacify or to blunt the effects of, you know, that sort of level of civil war in the Sahel region. But you know, we could be looking at it elsewhere. I mean, obviously, what else did we have? We had the Mokimboa, the prayer situation in Mozambique, which is part of the Islamic insurgency in Mozambique. In the camp, was it the Cabo Delgado, which is where it is, which is where, you know, now that they say it was a different entity. It was Al-Shabaab, but it wasn't the Somalian Al-Shabaab or something like that. But the thing is, I don't know much about it all. You know, I'm always sort of just talking off the cuff, really. But obviously, I know a little bit because I've been looking at it for so long. So I'm not an expert, but you know, just based on, you know, the experience I do have, essentially the thing that I picked up on and bearing in the back of my mind is the sort of concept of the way Al-Qaeda does things. And Al-Qaeda are, they, you know, if you read these sort of articles on them, they basically thrive on chaos. So if there was a civil war or there was lots of riots in Iraq, that's where they thrived, because they can then go in there during protests and riots and cause chaos. And I always think about it being like that. And so all of these groups that follow that same sort of process of feeding off of chaos, you know, and breakdown in law and order, they're going to be thriving, you know, throughout the virus as it impacts Africa. And I think that, you know, whatever we've got, whatever sort of situation we have in the UK, I think we've got about 2,000 people dead so far, which is nothing really, considering that the flu kills 8,000 people a year. and the whole country's come to a standstill, and they're bemoaning the lack of ventilators. I mean, these people just don't. A ventilator is luxury, and so these African nations are going to be, bit by bit, in one way or another, taking the full force of this in the sort of the latter half of this year. I think it's going to be devastating, and maybe that's why Task Force Takuba is in effect. I mean, I'm not suggesting anything, but you might have thought that the security forces are considering everywhere. I mean, even South Africa is, probably the most developed African nation, and they're going to have problems. The one we were just looking at here, I can't remember his names, Mozambique. Well, what's the other one? Zimbabwe. I mean, they've just legalized the dollar again just because they want to avoid any form of instability. But, you could probably put the African nations in a hierarchy of those at risk. You'd say people like, countries like Zimbabwe right at the top, Mali at the top, the effect of the virus on them, and the collapse of their society. Because I was reading one article. I read the Al Jazeera quite a lot. It seems quite balanced, and there was sort of, I can't remember what the headline was, but it was something like, they're not worried about being paid; they're worried about starving to death. The level of their problems are magnitude greater, and you might wonder whether or not the West can actually do anything to help them militarily wise by putting a strong presence in these countries like they are. I mean, in the UK they've got police everywhere, and they say it's just to make sure that people are observing the social distancing, but from my point of view it just looks quite clear that it's to make sure that things don't get out of hand from a law and order perspective. I mean, that's what they're sitting there for, because if the streets are empty, it's basically a criminal's paradise. Whether or not they're going to commit a burglary or they're just looking out to, for opportunity. I mean, it doesn't sound like much, but when you suddenly feel at risk, it's a major thing, because who's going to protect you? How are you going to, or rather, how are you going to defend yourself? And all these things sort of become amplified and highly significant in sort of, these dark hours. And so we've got police cars sat out everywhere, and, they say they're just looking, they're just questioning people to make sure they're not doing things that are not critical, so you have to have a real reason. There's no pubs open anymore. You can't really go to the DIY store or the garden centre and buy some plants. You can only go out for the most critical purposes. And the police are there to sort of make sure that happens. But I really think that that's not what they're doing at all. I don't think they're even stopping that many people at all. I just think that they're really just using a lot of propaganda to get the message out there, but they're there to, I think there's a bit of both, obviously, but I think their primary cause, but they're not going to sit there and say they're out there to preserve law and order and prevent the country from falling into civil war. Because that's basically, I mean, we're not at risk. I will certainly never be a fearmonger in that sense, but, there's no way that the government are not considering that at the highest level. It's sort of like probably a greater concern to them that they're on top of the situation and they considered all the risks and all the possibilities and permutations above and beyond the considerations for getting ventilators and supplying masks. I mean, I don't want to go on a little rant or anything, but I talk about how underfunded the NHS is, and it's like all these things. I look at them. I looked at a picture of an NHS unit where they were treating some coronavirus people. They look like a scene out of Star Wars. It's got to be there's absolutely everything there was purpose-built, modern, stuffed full of technology. It's like they say, our British troops are under-equipped. They can barely walk for all the equipment that they're carrying. They've got this sort of double talk of things like that. The NHS is highly equipped. I mean, the only thing, I accept that they've probably got things that I can't comprehend, but I went into hospital fairly recently, not for myself, but to see someone, and, it's just stuffed full of everything. These are not like hospitals that you see in the Middle East, where they're just rooms with beds and, domestic curtains on the windows and, sort of lampshades and all that sort of stuff. You can see the difference. So, the government consider, a lot of it is hyperlobe, sort of double talk really, or sort of propaganda, but, they're just talking the talk. And I think that, security concerns are probably paramount. It's not just security for their own country, but what happens if one of these terrorist organisations decides to do something? And I was thinking, what can they do? There's no public spaces anymore. But there was a terrorist incident in America. I'm not actually going to say what it was because I don't like to put ideas into people's minds or sound like I'm coming up with suggestions, but there are some things, but they're fairly minimal. But there was one in America, and so you think, what would they do? But I don't even think they really even know where England is. I think that they're far too busy in their own countries. It's more hyperlobe that we're all at risk. We had more outrages during the IRA troubles, almost on a weekly basis than we've ever had with, these Muslim extremists that we're supposed to be so afraid of. Again, I don't want to get too political, but the thing is, I think, I've only got a couple of minutes left on this, but I think, when you consider what I've just been talking about there and put it into like task force Takuba, I think the timing can't necessarily be completely coincidental. I think they're saying, wow, it's going to be difficult. We need to have a force present to stabilise the situation in the coming year, because that's when it's going to start kicking off. They've probably even got models and predictions of who and how many people are going to die, because people are going to die. There's all mass exodus in India, and whatever happens to us in the West is going to be a picnic compared to Africa. I think that's just a prediction, and fingers crossed. The only thing I think they've got in their favour, what's about, they've got 0 cases in the men's, because anyone with any underlying conditions and the illness is already dead from cholera and all the other diseases. They're so hardy and robust, they might not suffer as much. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. I've only got a few seconds left, and I'll speak to you later. Cheerio.